hey look, that's me in my previous video talking about Alan Wake 2 PC performance versus the very demanding system requirements list. And the biggest comment I'm seeing in that video is people would like to see some AMD GPUs. I'd like to do that as well, and that's what we are going to do here. However, one thing to note, one reason why I hadn't done that in the last video was I just ran out of time, honestly. The other reason was, Nvidia gave me the day one driver access early for this game, so I was able to use their Alan Wake specific drivers in that video. I don't know if AMD is going to have a day one optimized driver for this game or not, but I certainly don't have one at this point, so just do be aware of that. Also, I'll be testing the GPUs in the system requirements list here. In my Nvidia video, I checked if the 10 series, due to their lack of mesh shader support, could run the game. Performance was certainly bad, but AMD's 5000 series GPUs also lack mesh shader support, and I would love to test that, but I just want to mention I don't have any of AMD's 5000 series GPUs to test. So I will be unable to do that here, but we will start at the RX 6600, go from there. I do have all the cards on this list. We'll see if I have time to do any additional ones. Let's go ahead and thank today's sponsor and then hop into the benchmarks. A huge thank you to today's sponsor, Galaxy Lamps, and I want to tell you guys about the Galaxy Projector 2.0 that they sent over. This thing is really cool. I was setting this up to test it out, and my kids would not let me play around with it. And especially when you can get into the app where you can adjust the colors, adjust brightness, set timers. You can control the laser, so you get like laser lights and stars up on the ceiling, along with like a colorful nebula and this whole universe on your ceiling. It's really cool. My kids absolutely love this thing. And best of all, if you go to galaxylamps.co/Daniel Owen, you can get the Galaxy Projector 2.0 while it's still on sale. Follow that link in the video's pinned comment and or video description. Again, that's galaxylamps.co/Daniel Owen to get your Galaxy Projector 2.0 while the sale lasts. This game actually looks pretty incredible even on low settings, which is what we're looking at here. This is the RX 6600, and we are on 1080p native resolution, low settings. Now, this town area of the game looks great, but the forest area I think is actually a little bit more demanding. So we'll definitely switch over there. But I kind of like to start here, just kind of show off like how good this town can look on the low preset, and I will go ahead and double check the settings for you guys. So basically we're on 1080p native resolution, and at this point I've basically just clicked the low quality preset and left everything at its just default values from there. Now, keep in mind that the system requirements list for this game says that the RX 6600, which we're testing here, which by the way only costs around $200, is good for 1080p low settings with upscaling at the quality setting, and currently we're not using that, and good for only 30 frames per second. But here we're seeing that we're at almost 60 frames per second. However, I do want to mention again, like I said, that I think the forested area of the game, I think just with all of the foliage density, the shadows, things like that, I think we'll see a bit lower performance in this area. But again, even at low settings, it does look quite good. And I think that's really the challenging part of this game, is that the low preset, I think, is pretty much what the PlayStation 5 is running at. I don't have 100% confirmation on that, but I think fairly close. So you just really can't scale down to graphic settings that actually look bad but perform well, if that makes sense. It's always going to look fairly good. Now here, even in the forested area, while our performance is significantly lower, around 40, it is playable. Now I'm getting some stutters on my frame time graph. Do note that this is my first time running through this area, so it is possible that there could be some shader compilation issues happening there. So I'm actually going to run down this pathway a second time, and I'm curious if we will still see little frame time spikes. Seems a bit smoother, still a little bit of spikes. So interesting. I don't like those frame time spikes. Like I said, I don't know if there will be an optimized driver released for this game tomorrow when it launches. Like I said, I currently don't have one. But the overall performance does seem to be around 40 frames per second. Now, and that's already running at native resolution. And again, yes, low settings, but they do look pretty good. Now, the system requirements list was saying that we should be using quality upscaling, even at 1080p. Now, I'll be honest, in most games, I'm not in love with the FSR upscaling at 1080p resolution. I think we tend to look a bit pixelated. And from what I've seen of the console version of the game so far in videos like Digital Foundry's, my main complaint is the unstable image quality in the upscaling that's involved. But anyway, it does look like even here, running down this thick forested area, lots of foliage, lots of shadows, all of that. Other than the spiky frame time graph, which again I don't like, the actual performance is in the mid-50s, and on a variable refresh rate display, I think this is gonna look pretty good. My mouse movement feels a little bit choppy, which I noticed in my last video as well. A comment said that that's a common thing with this engine. The controller camera panning felt a little bit better, and especially if you're playing on a controller and the slow-paced gameplay here, I think frame rates like these are actually pretty much fine. In fact, I'd be curious if we could push graphic settings even higher and actually go back to native resolution. In other words, again, what if we were looking at more like a, I want to be over 30 frames per second, but maybe I don't care too much about high refresh rate. So it looks like at medium settings, native 1080p, we're a little over 30 in this scene. However, do keep in mind again that we don't know if this is the most demanding area of the game. I think it's pretty demanding. It's certainly a lot more demanding than the town section I showed you. But I'm certain that there's going to be, some kind of, more demanding area in the game. The foliage looks a little bit sparkly to me, I think, with interesting. Let me go ahead and kick on a bit of upscaling at those settings. So 720p internal resolution, so that's FSR2 quality. We're hitting 40-ish FPS, and again, this is at the medium preset. But again, even the low preset looks quite good. But I will say that if I'm playing a slow-paced game, 40 FPS can sometimes feel okay to me, where 30 FPS is still a little lower than I'd like to manage. Anyway, that's what we're seeing here. Performance-wise, maybe just for fun, let's go ahead and kick on, if we are going to upscale, what if we just went all the way up to the high-quality preset? So this is 1080p upscaled from 720p, FSR2 quality, at the high preset in the game. Again, lots of foliage, lots of shadows, and completely playable. And again, this is just a $200 graphics card at this point in time. So anyway, let's go ahead and check out the other ones on the system requirements list. I think the next up is the 6600 XT version. All right, I popped in the RX 6600 XT version, and currently we're at 1080p medium settings. We'll try some other stuff out as well. Now, let me run around here while I talk a bit about it and start the benchmark counter. So the system requirements list show this as the medium recommended AMD GPU, but they show that for 1440p medium 30 FPS with FSR2 on the balanced upscaling preset, which is not exactly what I'm testing here. So this is 1080p native medium settings, and it looks like we're, holding kind of in the upper 30s, around 40, kind of depends on which way we're looking, that kind of a thing. So, still seeing a bit of the same kind of stutters on the frame time graph that I noticed on the non-XT version of this card. But let's go ahead and go to the actual system requirements listed settings, which was 1440p output. And you know what? Before we kick on the upscaling, let's just try it out natively. So this is 1440p medium native resolution. Looks like we're down into the 20s. So we're certainly not going to be comfortable here without upscaling. So let's go ahead and kick that upscaling back on. So right here, we're almost 30 frames per second looking that direction, which seemed to be easier than looking the other way that had more dense foliage and shadows. But anyway, let's go ahead and go to the recommended preset, which was 1440p balanced upscaling medium preset, and reset my frame rate counters. And away we go. So heading this way, which seemed to be the less demanding direction to look. We're kind of in the 40s. Let's take a look down this way, which seemed to be a bit more demanding. Upper 30s, still pretty close to 40. And again, the system requirements list called this 30 FPS. And again, system requirements lists generally aren't giving you an exact average. It's more like if it's well below 60, they'll call it 30, if it's usually above 30. So yeah, it seems like that is pretty much hitting that. And again, this does seem pretty playable at these settings, especially if you were on a controller and especially this kind of slow-paced of a game. However, I do want to take a look at some other things. One is, what about the low preset? The main thing I noticed about the low preset is it does look good. The shadow quality is the one thing that really does kind of get me. It stands out as a little bit more flickery and distracting. So this is the low preset, but still with the balanced upscaling. I was just curious if it might smooth things out quite a bit by going down to these settings. Do see a little bit of shimmering on the foliage, things like that, which is probably for the most part an FSR2 upscaling artifact. But anyway, yeah, performance seems totally playable there, even if we're not locking 60 frames per second or anything like that. Let's go ahead and look at the quality upscaling if we're at the low preset, 1440p. Looks like that kind of puts us into the 40s running down this pathway. And what if we went ahead and looked at the native resolution? So this is 1440p native resolution, low settings. Looks like we're bouncing around 30, and I would imagine there's not a lot of headroom here for more demanding scenes. So looking like native 1440p is not going to be a good experience here. And let's go ahead and take a look at native 1080p resolution, though. So let's go native 1080p low settings. That's what we're at now. So 1080p low, it is not looking like it's going to be a 60 FPS experience, but it's in the mid 40s, even like I said, in this heavily shadowed and foliaged area of the forest here. And again, in a game like this, especially if you were playing on a controller and you know, it's pretty slow-paced gameplay from the parts of the game I have played, I think this is totally playable. Now the question becomes, can we get 60 frames per second in this scene if we do stay to the low preset and enable upscaling? So first, let's try quality upscaling. FSR does struggle at 1080p, especially. Tends to have a lot of fizzliness on the edges of characters and objects in motion, things like that. But it does look like if you are looking for a 60 frames per second experience, we are pretty close here. We're not holding it over it at all times, and like I said, I'm sure there will be areas of the game that are even more demanding than this, but looks like if we do FSR2 quality low settings, and the game still does look perfectly reasonable. There we go. Let's go ahead and try out the next GPU recommended, which was the 6700 XT. All right, we've now fired up the RX 6700 XT, and we can see here we're at 1080p native resolution at the medium preset. And this is the recommended GPU on the system requirements for medium settings at 1080p, but with performance mode upscaling in order to hit the 60 FPS target. Well, we're certainly at native 1080p and not hitting a 60 FPS lock. We are still seeing some of those frame time stutters. So if the assumption was maybe it was a VRAM issue on the 8GB cards, well, we're now on a 12GB card. VRAM usage is reporting below 8, and I'm still seeing some stutters, although I'm going to run back here again to see if it's smoothed out on the second pass. It actually does look a bit smoother here. Interesting. So I wonder if any of those stutters were related to VRAM. That's just a question mark. I certainly have absolutely no proof of that. And I still get a bit of a stutter when I turn the camera quickly there, it seems like. But anyway, let's go ahead and test out what they actually recommended in the preset, in the system requirements, which was going all the way down to performance mode upscaling, which seems a little extreme. And they did the same thing to the 6700 XT. not 67, sorry, the RTX 3070, and it also seemed a bit extreme on that one as well. Now, it does look like this is actually getting us to around 60 frames per second. So, actually seems fairly accurate, although I guess I would say I'm surprised that, okay, here now we're way over 60. Let me turn the other way again. Did it just take a minute to kick in or something? No, we're down to about 60 here. So what I'm seeing here is that, interestingly, it does seem necessary to do this if I want to keep above 60 when looking in the more demanding direction. However, when I'm, just looking this way, the same settings get us up over 80. So pretty interesting how big of a difference that can make. So it seems like maybe there's system requirements we're trying to really say, like, well, if you really don't want to be dipping below 60, this is what you've got to do. But again, when I just go back to the native resolution, okay, this direction is 48 frames per second. So we're just not gaining a massive amount in this particular scene from that. Now, not every graphics setting or shader, like scales with resolution. So it is possible that some of what's taking up that demand just isn't something scaling with resolution. It certainly looks like at native 1080p medium, we can be very, very playable here. But yeah, it does look like locking that 60 FPS is very difficult. So the other thing we could look at is what if we went down to the low settings, which again, I've shown do look quite good here. My biggest complaint is the resolution on the shadows in certain scenes looking a bit flickery. So going down to low settings, 1080p on the 6700 XT, that looks like we're kind of in the mid 50s. More stutters on the frame time graph on the low preset. That's interesting. Maybe it's these new shaders building since we've adjusted settings. Let me turn the corner again and see if it's a bit smoother the second time through. It does look a bit smoother the second time through, although not totally smooth. But overall frame rates are close to 60 frames per second. I'm curious if we did then kick on a little bit of FSR at the quality setting, if that would go ahead and boost us to higher frame rates. Again, though, I don't think this style of game really necessitates a high frame rate. Now here we are able to stay over 60 FPS going down this pathway, where that was a lot more difficult at the medium preset. So it certainly looks like going down to going down to low from medium did make that area a bit less demanding. Let's go ahead and look at this at 1440p though, because I think a lot of people with a 6700 XT have it as a 1440p GPU in mind, and we'll go back to the native settings. So we're now at 1440p low settings. Looks like we're in the 40s going this way. And turning back around, we are dipping into the 30s, the kind of upper 30s. That's with no upscaling. We can go ahead and kick on, probably not go all the way down to balance. Let's try quality. So let's try FSR quality at 1440p output resolution. Low preset, which again in this game does still look quite good. Looks like we're 60s-ish. Let's go ahead and turn this way, which seemed to be the more demanding thing. Yeah, definitely not over 60 here, but we're close to it. No major issues if you're on a variable refresh rate display, something like that. All right, guys, I think that wraps it up for the 6700 XT. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 7800 XT, which was the next recommended GPU. All right, we're on the RX 7800 XT, and currently we're at 1440p native resolution and the high preset, and I'll run around while I talk about that a little bit. So the system requirements list actually are listing this GPU as the recommended GPU for high settings at 4K resolution, but using an internal resolution of 1080p, meaning FSR2 at the performance setting. And that's not what I'm testing here. We're testing 1440p native, but I certainly will test that. And it's looking like we're not quite locking to 60 frames per second at a native 1440p, and looking down this more difficult corridor, we're definitely down in the upper 40s. Now, one option would surely be to turn off the high settings, but before we do that, let's also play around with the resolution scaling. So if I go down to quality upscaling, I'm curious where that gets us here. So we're at FSR2 Quality at 1440p output, high preset in the game, and actually now this difficult shadowed path through the forest that has given us trouble on some other GPUs certainly does seem to be actually handling pretty well. So it's looking like the 7800 XT can run this game at the high preset FSR2 Quality with pretty good results. Looks like you'll be mostly over 60 FPS. Again, I can't guarantee if some other scenes in the game are maybe going to be more demanding than that. But let's go ahead and test out what this was actually recommended for. Now, I'm not sure everybody buys a 7800 XT as a 4K GPU. I think it's more likely to be used as a 1440p GPU. But let's go down to the performance mode upscaling, 1080p internal rendering resolution, high preset. This is what the systems requirements list was talking about. And it's not looking like a 60 FPS experience. It looks like we're 60 going this way, but we were in the 50s looking down that more difficult pathway. Now that's actually similar to what I saw on the 4070, which is the Nvidia version for the same recommendation from the system requirements. I believe we were also dipping into the 50s down this pathway. I can't remember the exact number, but similar results there. But again, I really think that 1440p is much more likely to be the target for this particular GPU, but actually, we might not need to stay at the high preset. But you know what? I was about to change off of that. But before we do, why don't we actually check out 1080p resolution? Some people do buy a powerful GPU for a 1080p screen to hit higher refresh rates, especially in competitive games, and then you still play your single-player stuff too. So are we finally finding a GPU that is going to be running 1080p high preset over 60 FPS? It certainly does seem to be the case. Again, going this direction, we're actually over 80. And flipping back to the more demanding direction right here, we are still in the upper 60s. So yeah, it looks like this game can run the game at the maximum non-ray trace settings, 1080p native resolution. Going back to 1440p resolution, or actually, you know what? Since we're at 1080p, this is also the recommended GPU, or actually it's the 6800 XT, which is fairly similar performance-wise in many games. I don't know about this one. But rather than pop in a 6800 XT, this is also the low preset for ray tracing recommended GPU, albeit only for 30 frames per second in the systems requirements list. So let's try out 1080p low ray tracing. And without upscaling, it certainly looks like we are below 30 frames per second. So yeah, I'm going to pretty much say that's probably not going to be worth it there. We could try upscaling, but I just don't think kicking on FSR upscaling just to get a little bit of the ray tracing here makes a lot of sense. So instead, I want to go back to 1440p resolution with ray tracing off, and play around with if I wanted higher frame rates, what if we tried like the medium preset rather than the high preset? So we'll go to 1440p medium. So kicking down to medium, native 1440p. And I like the medium preset. Low looks pretty good, but again, the shadows seem to be a lot better resolution when you increase the presets. Obviously, I could go custom settings, but for the purposes of this video, I'm not really looking for optimized settings so much as just kind of playing around and seeing what we can get. Kind of in the 50s there, so it's not 60 FPS at the medium preset. What if we went to quality upscaling, which is usually pretty acceptable at 1440p? So it looks like this difficult pathway here, 1440p medium settings with FSR2 quality upscaling, seems like a pretty good experience here. Again, this easier direction, we're well up into the 80 frames per second range, and going back down this more difficult pathway, kind of upper 60s. All right, now this is the highest GPU on the system requirements list, but I think I have time to throw in a 7900 XTX and just see what the highest performing AMD GPU is capable of. All right, we're now on AMD's 7900 XTX, their top-of-the-line GPU. I have the AMD, I was going to say Founders Edition reference model. Anyway, we're at 1440p native resolution, and I am at the high preset with none of the ray tracing turned on. Let's go ahead and see if we can actually play the game at native 1440p on this monster of a GPU. And it's looking like we're doing pretty well so far. We are, yeah, in the upper 70s. Let's see how we do as we round this corner down this shadowed pathway that's given us a lot of trouble on other GPUs. And it's looking like this one can stay over 70 frames per second most of the time down that difficult hallway. So I think this bodes pretty well for if you do want to max out this game, non-ray tracing, but max rasterized settings, which look quite good. No upscaling 1440p, the 7900 XTX can get the job done. And while this isn't exactly super high frame rates, I think for this style of game, it's certainly plenty, and there's absolutely no need to turn things down from here. However, if you did kick on quality upscaling, let's go ahead and see what that does for us. Looks like we may now be around 100 frames per second going down this difficult forest pathway. And of course, you could also turn down settings and all of that. But I'm interested in using this as a 4K GPU. I think the 7900 XTX would often be purchased for 4K resolution, as well as 1440p. I think both make sense. So let's go ahead and go up to 4K resolution. Let's start out at the native 4K resolution, where even the RTX 4090 wasn't exactly hitting high frame rate targets, even without the ray tracing enabled. Let's go ahead and see how we do. So 4K resolution, high settings. Looks like we're going to be around 40 frames per second going down this difficult pathway. But again, that is a native 4K resolution at the high preset. So we are asking quite a bit. And like I said, this game isn't exactly bad at 40 FPS for the style of game it is, although definitely I think somebody on a 7900 XTX would probably be shooting for more. So the options are now to upscale and or turn down graphics settings, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to start with the upscaling. At 4K resolution, upscaling usually still looks pretty good at the quality setting, even using FSR, since we have still have a lot of pixels. You still have 1440p resolution internally, and then upscale it from there to look even better. And it is looking like that's going to be enough to hit 60 FPS going down our dark and difficult forest pathway. I am curious if we'd be able to do any ray tracing on the 7900 XTX. However, I don't think ray tracing at 4K resolution is probably going to be the thing to do. So we are instead probably going to be like, okay, if you bought this card for a 1440p graphics card, could you get by with any ray tracing at all? I'll go ahead and leave on the quality upscaling because we are using ray tracing. I'll leave the baseline settings at the high preset, and now we're going to kick the ray tracing preset onto low. That kicks on a variety of ray trace settings. It gets us ray traced direct lighting, as well as path traced it keeps off the path tracing, but it does get us transparency reflections at low. I don't think this forest scene is going to have a lot of that. And again, this is the quality upscaling already. So we're in the 40s. I mean, this is certainly playable. You're gaining something from the ray tracing, but you're also losing something from the upscaling and loss of frame rate. So I'm not sure this is going to be the recommended experience here, but it is certainly a thing. Now, just for fun, we're going to go to the performance mode upscaling. First, just see what it does to these ray tracing settings performance, but then we're going to just see if the path tracing setting works at all. So performance mode upscaling at 1440p, not really something I like to do with FSR, and it's still not hitting a full locked 60 FPS here. Looks like we're still dropping into the 50s. So not great. Probably not how I'd play the game, but just for fun, I want to see what happens when we kick on path tracing. So let's go to the ray tracing medium preset. This is going to turn on, it's going to bring up the denoising quality. It's going to leave on the direct lighting. We're going to get path traced indirect lighting at medium now, and path traced indirect lighting denoising quality at medium. Transparency reflections go up to high. Honestly, I'm not sure the forest is the best place to really show this off, but it is more demanding than the city is. So while the city, I think, you can show off the puddles and things like that. At least this is the more heavy-duty performance. It is actually looking like we're getting a 30 FPS experience. But again, this is requiring performance upscaling in order to do that, and I don't think the image quality trade-off is worth it. FSR2 Performance is leaving a lot to be desired on the image quality, especially in the tree branches, things like that. I think there's a lot of breakup around the edges, general softness to the image. But honestly, getting 30 FPS is actually more than I expected from a path tracing mode. So let's go ahead and kick on to the high ray tracing preset. So this brings the path traced indirect lighting up to high. So let's go ahead and see what happens. Now we can't use ray reconstruction, which the Nvidia GPUs are able to do, which both boosts performance as well as the image quality in my testing. And it does look like we're able to hit 30 FPS. So interesting. I think it was fun to test out, but I think these are definitely not these settings you would realistically want to use to play the game. All right, I think that's it for this video. Hopefully you guys found it useful and or interesting. Again, I'll be interested in seeing whether or not we get a day one driver or anything like that. Is there any interest in seeing Intel Arc GPUs? I think they already do have their driver out for this game, so maybe I could take a look at the Intel Arc GPUs. If you think that would be something you'd like to see, let me know in the comment section, and I hope all of you have an excellent day.